The Super Mario Maker franchise is over a decade old, a decade in which the evil community did everything in their power to come up with creative and fun ways to make Mario's life even more miserable. We've discovered ways to kill Mario when he jumps, managed to figure out how to cause enemies to spawn if a P-switch is triggered, build gigantic monsters to chase Mario, and most interestingly of all, we figured out how to turn the floor into shiny yet deadly coins as soon as Mario looks back. Nowadays, we just know about a seemingly endless way to build contraptions that allow us to make Mario's life hell. Here's the thing, however, that was not always the case, because behind every sophisticated contraption that we nowadays use, there is a story hidden, a story of how this contraption was first theorized about, how early rough setups allowed us to achieve the effect for the very first time, and how the community relentlessly iterated upon the design until we ended up with the high-tech version that we use nowadays. This technical evolution is what this video is all about. In this video, we're going to retrace the evolution of one such contraption in detail. What is the contraption that we're going to take a look back at? Well, it's don't look back contraptions, of course. So gentle ladies, gentlemen, and gentle people in general, are you ready? Then let's do this. Alrighty right, what better place to start our exploration of historic direction detection contraptions than with a very basic question. How do we actually track into which direction Mario is facing? And the answer is, of course, boos. Boos famously close their eyes as long as Mario is looking directly towards them, realizing that as long as they can't see Mario, Mario can't possibly see them. As soon as Mario turns around, however, the boos recognize the moment and start to move. This mechanic here, the fact that boos only move if Mario is facing away from them, is the core principle that pretty much every direction detection contraption is built around. Awesome. And with this, it is already time for us to take a look at the most simple don't turn around contraption possible. Something like this here. Here, we simply put a bullet blaster on top of a boo right in front of an exit door. If Mario looks away from the boo slowly starts to chase our plumber, dropping down the blaster in the process, eventually locking the exit door. So a contraption like this triggers incredibly slowly, way too slow to actually build a platforming stage around it. This setup, however, isn't entirely useless, because it can be used for simple puzzle levels. Take this room here as an example. Here everyone's favorite Hyrulean plumber named Link finds himself in the middle of a dungeon that the evil turtle Ganon built. The only way to leave the room is to activate the P-switch at the very left. If Link runs towards the switch, however, the boo slowly starts to chase him, dropping down the blaster and locking the exit in the process. How is poor Link ever supposed to escape this trap? Well, by solving the puzzle, of course. Here's what he has to do. If Link draws his bow while looking at the evil boo, then he's actually able to move backwards while looking at the ghost, allowing our brave swordsman not only to escape, but also showing us that even the most basic design has a possible use case. Who and Ray. Setups like this, however, never really got that popular. The first widely used direction detection contraption looked differently. It looked something like this here. Here, clever Mario Maker engineers put the boo into a clown car and a clown car in front of a P-switch and a muncher. The idea is pretty simple. Boos do not interact with physical objects, which makes it pretty hard to translate their movement into a measurable signal. Clown cars, however, do. As soon as we turn around, the boo in the clown car takes aim and starts to pilot towards us. As soon as the clown car gets moving, it violently crashes into the jumping P-switch in front of it, triggering it this way. This little contraption triggers vastly faster than a bullet bill on top of a boo does, making it actually possible to build a don't look back level using it. However, this contraption still takes quite a bit until it triggers. If Mario is quick and serious, then he might actually survive a quick glance behind, which is obviously unacceptable. This contraption isn't lethal enough. Luckily, the Mario Maker community soon figured out a way to improve its murderability. Actually several, because as a matter of fact, several very similar don't look back contraptions popped up around the same time, relatively early during the lifespan of the original Mario Maker. Designs like this one here, or that. The idea for both designs is simple. Instead of using a clown car as a physical object, we simply put a muncher on top of the boo. As soon as the boo moves, the muncher follows along, which allows us to translate the signal. In this contraption, it kills a bob-omb as soon as Mario turns around. In that contraption, a spring pews away a P-switch, murderously destroying the floor using a different setup. And contraptions like this are actually pretty decent. They trigger immediately as soon as Mario turns around, there is absolutely no leeway for our poor plumber, and they punish the turning very quickly with a lethal lava bath. These direction detection contraptions are actually the first really solid designs that can be used for tons of different things. Here, for example, we threw our plumber into a pretty straightforward boss battle against Bowser Jr. Quite literally, because Mario is only allowed to fight while looking straight forward. As soon as our plumber turns around, he stops having fun because the floor is gone. Inspiring. However, these contraptions are far from perfect. What's the big problem here? Well, they're locally limited. Each of these contraptions only scans which direction Mario is looking at for roughly one screen. And that's a problem, because these contraptions can't simply be chained together in a long row, because these contraptions break as soon as Mario passes them. The dumb boos don't stay on duty once Mario passed them. They are all like, boo-hoo, let's chase Mario now that he's no longer in front of us, which causes the entire thing to break into pieces. Since these setups are so locally limited, it is incredibly clumsy to build an entire long stage around them. I actually tried to solve this problem a couple of years ago in a stage I made. The best solution for this problem that I was able to come up with at that time was to closely monitor Mario's exact position during the level and to regularly lock down the path we came from in such a way that it is never possible to break any mechanisms. But these stages are clunky and they're complicated to set up. So how do we solve this mess? Well, that's a great question. We have to talk about platforms for a moment. Platforms on tracks are really interesting. You see, if we put a platform on a track, then the platform moves along the track. Mind-blowing, I know. Here's the thing, if we make the track really long, then the platform moves along it for a very long time. And if we put something on top of this platform, say a bullet blaster, then this blaster moves along the very long path on top of the platform. Obviously, but actually, all of that is really interesting for a simple reason. You see, a bullet blaster usually despawns once it gets away from us far enough. We can easily see this here. We put the blaster on a conveyor belt, we wait for a moment and poof, the poor little blaster is gone. It moved on to a better place. However, if we put a blaster on top of a platform and let the platform travel far away from us and back again, then the blaster magically stays on top of it. Why is that? Well, it is because Nintendo doesn't want things to disappear from platforms. It's pretty normal for a platform to travel a bit outside the normal loading area and back in again. It would be really weird if all the items on top of the platform were to disappear whenever that happens, and thus Nintendo does something very simple. It keeps items on top of platforms on tracks loaded, independent of whether the player is, which is one of the most central mechanics for building Mario Maker contraptions there is. Everything that we build on top of a platform on tracks will stay loaded throughout the entire level. A platform on tracks is global ground. Nothing on top of it will despawn no matter how far away from it the player is. Which already brings us back to our direction detection contraption. You see where this is headed? If we were to somehow manage to build one of our direction detection contraptions on top of global ground, then it would solve the problem that our previous designs had with scalability. If we find a way to keep such a contraption loaded throughout the stage, then we only need to build a single one, and turning around would be lethal throughout the entire stage. And this is where all of this becomes so terribly complicated. Because we can't get a boo on global ground for the life of it. Boos are above ground. They do not interact with solid things below them. If we put a boo on top of a platform on tracks, then the game doesn't consider the boo to be on top of the platform because the boo is hovering. Boos defy global ground. For the longest time, this was the bottleneck that prevented us from coming up with direction detection contraptions that really work throughout the entire level. Until a discovery was made. Check this out. We're back in our Bullet Blaster laboratory with another fascinating experiment. Things are about to get exciting. So if we run the room like this, the blaster disappears. Oh no. If we put a Goomba on the blaster and start the game, then the blaster and the Goomba disappear. Oh no. If we put a Hammer Bro on top, then the blaster disappears with the Hammer Bro, which is great. However, if we put Bowser Jr. on top then, well, you better make sure you're seated for what is about to happen, because otherwise it might blow you off your feet. If we put Bowser Jr. on top then the blaster does not disappear. Do you understand the tremendous consequences of this unbelievable discovery? As it turns out, putting an entity on global ground isn't the only way to keep it loaded, because boss enemies are globally loaded as well. Boss enemies are globally global, which means if we put any of them anywhere on an enemy stack, then the entire stack inherits the globality from the boss. Exciting, I know, because what this means is that we do not need to put a boo on global ground to keep it loaded. We can actually use a boss enemy to make the boo part of a global stack. Just take a look at this. Here we start at the far left side of the level and have Mario travel to the right. Afterwards, our poor plumber has to make it through a pretty normal stage with a twist. Mario isn't allowed to look back at any point of the stage. We're globally tracking the direction into which our plumber is looking. If our poor Mario ever succumbs to the temptation of turning around, then he immediately falls into his shiny death, of course. How does this global direction detection contraption work? Well, surprisingly simple. On top here is a bob-omb that is standing on a blue platform. Besides it is a boo with a muncher on top. It's pretty much the same setup as before, but this time there is a boss enemy on top of them, causing the entire contraption to stay loaded. If we look away from the boo booms, the boom bot triggering the on-off block, causing this muncher to fall down. The muncher is once again globally boss stacked and drops on a P-switch on top of a snake platform. Snake platforms are global ground as well, meaning that everything in this contraption permanently stays loaded globally, forcing Mario to never look back. Hooray! This contraption is a huge improvement over the designs that came before. However, it still has a very obvious flaw. It only works if we start with Mario in front of the contraption and then transport him to the other side of the level. A setup like this requires Mario to move towards the contraption. It only triggers if Mario is looking away from it. But since we have to load this contraption in for it to globally work, we have to awkwardly move Mario away from the contraption on conveyor belts before starting the actual level. These contraptions only can track if Mario looked back while moving towards them. But what if we wanted to track Mario's direction while we are moving away from a contraption? Which brings us to a fascinating little quirk in Mario Maker: boo cuddling. So what is boo cuddling, I hear you ask? Well, check this out. Here we have a platform that pushes a muncher on top of a Goomba. Both the muncher and the Goomba have a boo stacked on top. So once we run this little device, the two boos end up cuddling on top of each other. Which brings us to the little quirk in Mario Maker. You see, as long as the boos are not moving, the game doesn't care about the boos cozily cuddling. As soon as the boos start to move, however, the game tries to resolve the cuddle, pushing one boo to the left. We can actually already use this little quirk to build a normal direction detection contraption if we really wanted to. But that is not the point. You see, the boo that gets pushed to the left is actually the boo that was to the right before. But what happens if we put another boo to this boo's right and two more boos on top of these? Once we start the game like this, the trap triggers and the central boo becomes locked up in a cuddle trap for eternity. The boo in the center now can no longer escape the cuddling. The game can't resolve the collisions in such a way that the boo ends up outside the boo prison. And this is where things become really interesting. You see, this boo isn't technically stacked on top of anything. If we turn around, it tries to chase us, but can't. But take a close look at what exactly happens. Did you see it? It's incredible, I know. Let's take a look at it once again in slow motion. You caught it now? The boo clearly moves a tiny bit to the right once we change direction. Do you understand the world-shaking implications of what we're just witnessing? This boo here is moving when we are looking towards it, yet it is stationary when we're looking away from it. This boo behaves exactly the opposite to how boos ought to behave. The signal detection is inverted. This is exactly what we need to build a direction detection contraption from which we can move away from. So huge shout out to Mario Maker wizard Geisha, who recently posted this setup on Discord. This simple setup allows us to translate the boo cuddling into a usable signal as soon as we turn around. At that point, this contraption should be pretty self-explanatory. Bowser Jr. ensures that everything stays globally loaded while the one-way door entraps the bob-omb at the top in such a way that the small movement of the boo is enough to get rid of the floor. Hooray! At that point, we know how to set up global direction detection contraptions for pretty much every use case that we ever could wish for. Every use case but one. Because as a matter of fact, there is one thing that we still can't do. The holy grail of direction detection contraptions. so to speak. So far, we're only tracking changes in Mario's direction once. But what if we want to continuously test for Mario's direction? What if we, for example, want to build a stage in which an on-off block is always deactivated if we look to the left, but always active if we look to the right? Is something like this possible to achieve? Well, check this out. Here Mario finds himself in the middle of an evil trap that Bowser built. At first glance, everything looks like a normal level, but as it turns out, there is a dark twist going on. Because whenever a plumber changes direction, the on-off blocks change state as well. Oh dear. Mario, however, is not afraid of dangerous direction detection contraptions and manages to make it past this trap only to end up in the next one. Now poor plumber finds himself on top of a moving bullet blaster contraption. The problem here? Well, the blasters always move opposite the direction that Mario is facing, causing our poor plumber quite a headache. To make matters worse, Mario is also attacked by a dangerous spike snake while trying to pilot the contraption to the end. Once the blasters hit the far right side of the room, the exit opens up and Mario is finally able to leave, only to encounter Boom Boom in the next room. Once again, there are on-off blocks changing state whenever Mario changes direction, meaning that whatever trickery is going on in the background is doing so globally. Hooray! So how in all the fuzzy's names does this work? Well, it's actually surprisingly simple. So first, huge shout out to Mario Maker Wizard and honestly walking Mario Maker contraption compendium, Geiche, who, to the best of my knowledge, is the person that originally came up with this design. So take a look at this. Unbelievable, I know. It's honestly difficult for me to stay calm when talking about this beauty. This contraption here is the Rolls-Royce of direction detection contraptions. It's one of the coolest things ever built in Mario Maker. It's so wonderful. So how does this scientific marvel work? Well, at its core, it's the same trick that we just used before. The central mechanic is once again a boo cuddler that allows us to detect whether Mario changes direction. This time, however, we use a precise setup to translate Mario looking away from the contraption to slightly raise a spring, which in return interacts with this enemy tower once we're facing away. The result? Well, the result is that this enemy tower starts to violently shake if we look away from it, but stops to shake as soon as we look towards it. How do we translate the shaking tower into an on-off block activating? Well, that is by using a completely different mechanic that is kind of beyond the scope of this little video and a topic for another day, but the basic mechanic behind it is a quirk in half-loaded spike balls. You see, items are usually only loaded when they're about within 4 blocks of the camera. If an item is outside the loaded area, but on a platform that itself is loaded, then the game generates a placeholder for that item. The game pretty much loads the platform and then half loads the items that are on top of it. These items are pretty much in a quantum state between existing and not existing at the same time. The item is a placeholder, it is half loaded. And half loaded spike balls tend to do funny things. Just take a look at this setup. As soon as we run this, the muncher is pushed into the spike and the spike ball is destroyed. Obviously, if we load the contraption. But if we run this contraption from the side in such a way that only the platform is fully loaded, but not the spike ball, then something curious happens. The half-loaded spike ball continuously hits the on-off block without being destroyed. Weird. Even weirder, if we raise the on-off block 1 block above the ground and put another red block above it then the spike block triggers exactly once when activated without becoming destroyed in the process. Half-loaded spike balls are incredibly useful because they give us a tool to trigger on-off blocks repeatedly whenever we activate the half-loaded spike, which is exactly what Geiche's direction detection contraption is doing. If the boo tower vibrates, a half-loaded spike ball gets pushed into an on-off block, and once it stops vibrating, another one does, which is how Mario's direction is translated into blocks changing state. And that's it. This is how a simple tech idea, like having a boo drop an item to block a door if Mario isn't looking, slowly got iterated and iterated upon, and as more tech got discovered, slowly transformed from a fun little gimmick to a contraption that pretty much codes a new game mechanic into Mario Maker. This is how direction detection contraptions evolved. So before we wrap this up, just 2 more things. So first, a gigantic thank you to all my wonderful patrons whose names are currently scrolling by. These wonderful people not only regularly get small additional content and bonus stuff, but their generous support is also the global loading, making videos like this one possible in the first place. A huge thank you to them for that. Second, Well, as it turns out, we haven't reached the end of the history of direction detection contraptions yet, because funnily enough, Mario Maker community members 5x Whale and Gatia, the master himself, have actually been tinkering with such designs the past couple of days, completely independently of me doing this video. And as it turns out, Gatia just shared a new and improved design literally less than 24 hours before I waffled all of this in my beloved microphone, which you know is a really funny coincidence, but also shows how active the whole community still is. So what could possibly be improved over the design we just took a look at? Well, two things. First, we can't use on-off blocks in the stage when using this design. If we give Mario access to an on-off block in a level like this, then weird things tend to happen and the contraption may bug out. Second, while the contraption triggers really fast, it isn't perfect yet. If we were to find a way to activate all of this even faster, then the contraption would be even greater. So take a look at the clip that Gage just shared the other day. Yep, it's the coolest thing ever. This here is the setup used to achieve this. It looks as if the final chapter in the history of direction detection contraptions might not yet be written. Hooray! So thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed this little video. If you did, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up and maybe feel especially direction detection contraption today and want to hit the subscribe button as well. Finally, if you truly love the video and want to support content like this, then there's also the option to support the channel via Patreon. Thank you so much for watching and until next time, lots of hugs.